Here is the translation of all paragraphs into English without slang, titles, or numbering. Each paragraph is translated individually without summarization. The glass of the shop window fogs from the inside when Julia pushes the door of the flower shop, and the metal bell chimes like a calling note. Outside, the sea breeze spills salt into the air. Inside, it's another tide, one of damp, green fragrances. She hasn't come to buy anything, but she pretends otherwise, like someone grasping at an excuse that was fragile from the start. A drop slides down an orchid stem and lands near her fingers. That's when Julia sees her, Claire, sleeves rolled up, a thin cut on her thumb protected by a beige bandage, her blonde hair tied in a ponytail that always insists on letting one strand escape behind her ear. The two pause for a moment that lasts too long to be mere courtesy, and the world seems to hold its breath, compressing the distance between a question and its answer. "Can I help you?" Claire asks, her voice low, as if the space demands respect. Julia nods, but her head says yes for one reason and her mouth for another. She watches the precise way Claire rests the scissors against the stem, the care of someone who knows where to cut so life can continue. The light from the skylight draws a rectangle over the wooden tables, and particles of floral dust shimmer as if snowing in reverse. "I'm looking for something hardy," Julia says, lingering on the word as if testing its limits, something that can withstand salty winds but doesn't lose its scent at night. "Hardiness with night fragrance," Claire repeats, and there's an almost invisible smile at the corner of her mouth. "That's not a common request. But I like requests like that." Julia senses the answer isn't just about plants. She walks among the pots, letting her fingers glide over cold ceramic, over handwritten labels. The place has the organized chaos of a laboratory, the private logic of someone who understands the language of leaves and shadows. A small antique radio, at a whisper's volume, plays a distant bolero. The flower shop seems to breathe with Claire, each of her steps adjusts the rhythm of the room. "You're not from here," Claire says, turning naturally, as if she already knew the answer. "I arrived recently." "I'm on a break." Julia chooses the word like someone touching a freshly covered wound. "Breaks tend to reveal what haste hides," Claire concludes, crouching to reach a tray of seedlings under the counter. There's a similarity between how Claire treats the plants and how she looks at Julia: patient attentiveness, silent assessment, gentleness with the possibility of harm. Julia notices the bandage on Claire's finger and thinks about how small incisions can save the whole. Claire's hands bear tiny scratches that tell a story of long days, of intimacy with what grows slowly. "Try this," Claire says, lifting a small night-blooming jasmine, still shy. Sometimes the most faithful scent appears when no one else is watching. Julia brings her face closer, as if smelling a secret. The fragrance is subtle now, more promise than presence, but there's a sweet note that lingers in memory. As she hands the pot back, their fingers brush. It's not a shock, it's more like a brief recognition, a fine line of warmth that travels up her arm. Claire doesn't pull away. Neither does Julia. "You know the tides," Julia ventures, almost a whisper. "And you know time," Claire replies, wiping the sweat from a freshly watered pot with the back of her hand. They're similar sciences. They circle the shop as if navigating an intimate constellation: the succulent table, the wall of climbing vines, the corner of healing herbs. Julia says little, but her silence leaves traces. Claire speaks more when demonstrating, less when explaining. Sometimes, she just lifts a leaf to the light, and Julia understands the answer lies there, in the transparency of the veins. The floor is burnished concrete, cold underfoot, and the day pulls the brightness outward, toward the sea, a tacit invitation to stay inside. "What's your name?" Claire asks, as if letting the question fall between threads of water. "Julia." "I'm Claire." They repeat each other's names as if tasting something new on their tongues. Julia sees in Claire's blue eyes a soft vigilance, someone measuring the right distance for something to bloom without suffocating. She feels her clothes cling slightly to her skin at the nape of her neck, the shop's air is humid, tempered by sprays Claire activates often. The sound of the spray is a liquid tick-tock. Where are you staying, Julia? At an inn behind the lighthouse. She leans her shoulder against the wooden shelf, feigning interest in the small pots. Do you need help with anything here? I could catalog if you want. I'm good with species. I have a feeling you're good with what avoids labels, Claire says, folding a cloth and wiping away water remnants. The sentence hangs between them like a mirror. Julia looks away first, but not enough to hide that she's been seen. A couple enters, asks for a quick bouquet. Claire attends to them, her fingers changing rhythm, quicker, briefer, and Julia catches herself envying the ease with which others ask for simple, concrete things, while her own desire has no flower, no price, no wrapping paper. In the background, the radio crackles and changes songs. The sea breeze presses against the window, the skylight seals the afternoon with pale glass. When the couple leaves, Claire returns more slowly, as if the interruption had organized some thoughts. She picks up the night-blooming jasmine again and carries it to the door. Take it to smell at night, she says. You don't have to buy it. Just bring it back tomorrow. What if I don't bring it back? Julia asks, knowing the question carries another weight. Then you'll have to come back to explain, Claire replies, without theatrics. Julia accepts the pot, but when Claire hands it over, her hand lingers a second longer. A second that's neither accident nor confession. It's a line drawn on the ground. Both know it, both pretend otherwise. Outside, the world makes noise of cars and seagulls. Inside, the loudest sound is breathing trying to keep its rhythm. Thank you, Julia says, and the word feels insufficient. The town is small. We'll bump into each other, Claire replies, and each other includes streets, squares, and something that has no name. Julia crosses the door as if passing through a membrane. The bell chimes, the late afternoon light welcomes her, and the cold wind slowly clears the excess of fragrance. She walks with the pot held to her chest, as if preventing part of the day from escaping. At the intersection, she looks back and finds Claire repositioning a climbing plant, adjusting hooks, checking moisture. There's no wave. Just the certainty that they've been seen and, therefore, exist. At night, on the inn's porch, Julia waits for the moment the night-blooming jasmine fulfills its name. The lighthouse turns, spilling a slice of light over the dark sea. The sound of waves seems closer than it is. When the fragrance finally rises, it's not explosive, it's patient, suggestive, as if needing to be sure it's desired. Julia closes her eyes and breathes, and deep in the air, she finds a note that doesn't belong to the flower, a trace of the shop, of sprayed water, of a hand that touched leaves and then her. Hardiness with night fragrance, she repeats to herself, testing the phrase. She doesn't know if it's a definition of plants or people. She thinks of the bandage on Claire's finger, the care in cutting where one should, the risk of cutting wrong and losing the entire branch. A mosquito lingers near the lamp. Julia turns off the porch light and lets the lighthouse be the only blade still lit. Her hands rest in her lap, but they're not calm. A nerve pulses beneath the skin, reminding her of the moment their fingers touched. She wonders if she'll return early tomorrow or wait until afternoon, for the excuse of watering. She rationalizes the need to return the pot like someone preparing a report, yet, she knows that behind the diligence, there's a reason science doesn't cover. Before sleeping, Julia searches her phone for any photo of her past life, crowded auditoriums, presentation slides with Latin, a smile trained for cameras. The image returns her to the question that brought her here: what remains when a calendar is emptied? On the nightstand, the night-blooming jasmine holds its discreet promise, like a secret asking for time. Julia realizes she's hungry for two different things, one with a known name, another that can't yet be spoken. And she senses that both, if mismanaged, can kill with thirst. The next day, the sky carries the threat of rain, and the town smells of wet stone before the first drop falls. Julia holds a simple bag, inside, the pot, and a piece of paper with irrigation notes she wrote to feel less exposed. When she pushes the door, the bell announces her again, and the flower shop responds with fresher air, as if washed from within. Claire has her back turned, standing on a stool to fasten a ribbon to ivy. Hearing the sound, she turns her face over her shoulder and smiles without surprise. "You came early," she says, stepping down. "The inn's tides didn't let me sleep," Julia tries to joke, handing over the pot carefully. "It's more fragrant than I remembered." "Sometimes memory needs company to complete the scent," Claire replies, examining the soil with her fingers. Julia extends the paper with her notes. Claire reads, lifts her gaze, and there's something like approval, but also a test. "You take seriously what you touch." "Depends on what touches me," Julia counters, and the words escape before she can smooth their edges. A fine rain begins tapping the shop window, drawing trails that distort the outside world. Claire gestures toward the back room. "I have a garden out back. Want to see?" Most people don't. The passage is narrow, the hallway smelling of fresh earth. When they reach the backyard, the street noise vanishes, only droplets on the tarp, the hesitant chirp of a bird, and the open sound of leaves accepting water remain. The garden isn't large, but it's deep, layers of green at different heights, calculated improvisations, an iron chair that's face-time without bending. Claire points to 2 orchids that haven't yet shown their purpose. "They're waiting for the right moment," she explains. "Forcing it too soon can break something irreparable." Julia runs her hand over the chair's back, feels the roughness of weathered paint, the cold rising to her skin. The proximity between them has lessened without them noticing, the rain brings them closer, forcing them to share the canopy of a tree as an improvised umbrella. The scent of Claire's hair is simple, clean, and for a second, Julia wonders if this is how addictions start, by recognizing scents. "If you want, you can come tend this section on Thursdays," Claire says, making space beside the flower bed. "I need hands that understand what roots ask for." The invitation is professional but holds other doors. Julia kneels beside her, touches the soil with her palm and the back of her hand, like checking for fever. The contact of skin with humus returns an ancient pulse, a language prior to any explanation. Claire watches in silence, only when the rain thickens does she extend a light jacket and drape it over Julia's shoulders. The fabric still carries her body's warmth. "Thank you," Julia says, without the courage to return the jacket immediately. "Plants thank you better when you forget yourself for a few minutes," Claire replies, almost smiling. Julia presses the jacket to her chest, the sleeve is wide and wraps around her like an arm memory decides to keep. The garden breathes, the rain marks time, a distant bell tolls from some hidden church. Claire leans to show a cluster of buds, and her sleeve brushes the back of Julia's hand. The touch is brief but alters both their temperatures. Julia withdraws her hand slightly, more from surprise than refusal, and the skin freed from the fabric prickles like a leaf under new wind. "Thursday, then," Claire says, looking back at the orchids, her voice slightly lower. "Thursday," Julia repeats, and the word seems to accept a mission not yet explained. The rain suddenly lessens, as if someone turned a dial. Claire picks up a fallen leaf and tucks it into her apron pocket. The return passage is the same but already feels different. At the door, Julia grips the handle and hesitates, unsure whether to say more, ask for something, or simply let Thursday arrive on its own. Claire looks at her with that attention that doesn't invade, that waits. The bell doesn't ring yet, the suspended moment stretches the hallway as if time reluctantly made space. "Claire," Julia says, and the name hangs in the air, asking for continuation. Thursday arrives with a cotton-like brightness in the sky, and Julia tries not to seem too eager as she crosses the square toward the flower shop. Her body betrays her, her breath quickens, her fair skin flushes lightly at the cheeks from the wind, and her wavy brown hair, loose over her shoulders, tangles in her coat as if each strand has its own opinion. She carries herself with a mix of study and practice, 1.70 meters of a presence that doesn't demand much space but occupies just enough, long botanist's hands, short nails, imaginary soil streaks on her knuckles, like muscle memory that won't fade. Her green eyes, more attentive than she'd admit, seem to search for something specific before the door even opens. They search for the first sign of Claire. The shop breathes the same humid, sweet air as on her first visit, but today there's the scent of drying rain, sun-warmed wood, a remnant of lavender on the cloth used to wipe the counter. Claire is at the back, her profile turned to the slanted light from the skylight. Hers is a beauty that doesn't ask for validation, 1.65 meters of confident gestures, straight blonde hair, glossy, falling straight to her collarbone. Today, she's pinned it back with a simple clip that exposes her golden nape, sun-kissed not from the beach but from work. Her blue eyes have the clear tone of washed glass, and her skin, golden, healthy, bears nearly invisible microcuts that testify to intimacy with leaves and wire. Her frame is lean, light musculature from lifting boxes, dragging pots, climbing stools. The dark apron marks her waist effortlessly, and when she moves, everything about her aligns with the task's necessity. "I thought you'd forget me," Claire says, casually, like someone watering a bed that knows the hour. "I tried," Julia replies with a closed smile. "But this garden is insistent." A customer interrupts, asking for 3 lily stems and a blue satin ribbon. Julia watches how Claire measures, cuts, ties, delivers, and beneath the craft, there's a parallel text. Claire's body leans, her hair moves against gravity with uncalculated elegance, her sleeve rides up slightly, revealing a firm forearm, a wrist bearing a thin, worn metal bracelet. When the customer leaves, the bell complains, and silence returns like plaster sealing everything anew. "The back garden is waiting for you," Claire says, gesturing to the hallway. The narrow passage pushes them closer, the walls bear marks where pots have brushed against mortar. Julia feels the temperature shift as she steps into the backyard. The air grows cooler, the earth more present, a discreet chorus of bees visiting tiny flowers. Claire picks up a box of tools, scissors, a knife, twine, and hands one to Julia with the ease of someone passing cutlery at the table. "Let's start with the orchids that haven't decided anything yet," she suggests. "Sometimes, they need a conversation water can't give." They kneel side by side. The proximity isn't accidental, it's work. But work is the perfect disguise for attention that doesn't dissipate. Julia touches the substrate with her fingertips, the spongy texture yielding slowly. Claire points to a possible cutting spot, the breath of a plant asking for less light and more patience. Their dialogue runs in the same register, sparse, quiet, layered with subtext. "You always know where to touch," Julia says, and she's not just talking about plants. "I learned to avoid places that bleed without purpose," Claire returns, and she's not just explaining scissors. The first peak comes when their hands meet over the same root node. Julia's skin is warm, Claire's, cooler from the metal scissors. Their fingers brush, linger a second, retreat with the dignity routine demands. Julia swallows dryly, her throat records. Claire licks her lower lip in an automatic gesture that isn't rehearsed seduction, making it more dangerous. Wind rises from the street, lifts the pergola's tarp, casts a flickering shadow pattern over their backs. The world steps back so the garden can see them better. "Can I fix your hair?" Claire asks, and the question is simple but carries an offer of line. Julia tilts her face slightly. Claire raises her hand and touches the rebellious strand that insists on falling behind Julia's ear, mimicking the gesture Julia noticed on her first visit. Her index finger brushes the curve of Julia's ear, and there, the body concentrates a calm discharge, a small, warm warning. Julia keeps her eyes half closed, feigns attention on the plants, takes invisible notes on what that touch inaugurates. The strand returns to place but leaves traces. "Does the lighthouse keep you up?" Claire asks, to break or extend what just happened. "The lighthouse reminds me the sea always has people returning," Julia says, with that serious tone she uses when avoiding vulnerability. And you came back to what? The question drives a stake. Julia lowers her eyes to the orchid, adjusts the twine holding the stem, buys time. I came back to hear what I ignored, she finally replies. The rest might come later. Claire accepts the answer as if it's enough for now. The conversation shifts to plants, but tension weaves through their words. When they stand, Julia's knee cracks softly, and she laughs awkwardly, adjusting her clothes. Claire's jacket is still there, within reach. Julia wears it for a moment, and the scent, a mix of neutral soap, tap water, and a soft citrus, imposes itself. Claire notices. You can keep it while you water the bromeliads. The water splashes, she warns. What if I don't return it? Julia repeats the game, more confident, a risk of irony in her voice. You'll have to wear it back, Claire says in a way that seems innocent but lingers like an image painfully possible. The second peak happens with the hose's improvisation. Julia holds the nozzle, Claire controls the valve. The water emerges in a timid jet, fans out, draws an arc of droplets over the leaves. The sun, sliced by clouds, creates a small, secret rainbow only they can see from that angle. Julia adjusts the position and accidentally directs the spray at Claire's apron hem. A splash rises to her white shirt underneath, translucent for a moment before recovering. They laugh, and the laughter relieves tension without losing control. Claire steps closer and holds Julia's hand over the hose, guiding the spray's direction with her fingers. It's an overlap lasting longer than technical need. The water finds its place, so do their hands. Like this, Claire whispers, and like this applies to more than water. The sun shifts, and the shop's interior light begins to gild, signaling afternoon's cadence. They go inside to rest. Claire heads to the old electric coffee maker, prepares 2 mugs. The aroma rises warm, full-bodied, marrying the plant scent in an agreement Julia hadn't imagined making sense. They sit on the wooden bench under the shop window. The city passes in silhouettes, and no one notices a story being prepared inside. Have you always worked with this? Julia asks, blowing on her mug, letting steam touch her face. No. I ran from something else, like you. Only my escape became home, Claire says, without hiding. I turned escape into a resume, Julia admits. It worked until it didn't. And now? Now I plant questions. Good silence. The radio in the back switches to a singer stretching vocalizations. A child runs on the sidewalk with colored paper that must be a kite. Julia turns her mug, and in the motion, the jacket sleeve rides up, revealing her pale forearm, a visible vein. Claire watches unhurriedly, as if legitimizing territory. Claire's blue eyes aren't cold in examination, they hold the warmth of attention without dominance. Julia notices and offers another inch of skin, like dipping a toe to test the sea's temperature. Claire withdraws her gaze and smiles slightly, almost a secret. There's an early market tomorrow, she comments. If you want, you can come with me to pick flowers. You learn more about people than plants at the market. And about you? Julia lets slip, unguarded. About me, only if you wake before the lighthouse tires, Claire says, and the answer lights a signal demanding courage. The third peak rises with the sentence. Julia imagines walking beside Claire at dawn, mentally brushes her elbow to navigate stalls, smells cut leaves and fresh bread, hears vendors chatter and, beneath it, the intimate layer of a conversation existing only when the city still yawns. She doesn't know what she'll say if she goes, she knows she wants the invitation repeated in other forms. I wake easily, she risks. Then come at 6:30. Bring a coat unafraid of rain. Julia agrees, and her body registers with a vibration resembling recognition, as if finding a routine it doesn't yet know but already understands. The mug empties, hands cool. Claire stands, collects cups, adjusts invisible things always needing adjustment in a breathing shop. Julia approaches the workbench and observes an arrangement in progress. Stem by stem, Claire establishes a near-silent geometry, a math of colors and heights no ruler predicts. "You make it seem easy," Julia says. "You just have to listen," Claire replies, and her hands confirm. The fourth peak, lower but intense, comes when Julia extends her palm with a mute request to hold the arrangement briefly. Claire transfers the bouquet's weight into Julia's hand from above, and in that meeting, the pressure of fingers against fingers compresses a code neither translates. The bouquet is sustained, so is the air. Their breathing sinks for an instant before scattering into street noise. The afternoon reaches that stretch where everything smells like going home. Julia knows she should leave, prepares farewell words that don't sound false but also don't sound enough. Claire wipes the counter with the lavender cloth. Julia follows the motion, hypnotized by the circle growing and erasing water stains. The cloth stops, the music changes, the doorbell decides not to ring. "See you tomorrow, then," Julia says, her voice halfway between certainty and question. "See you tomorrow," Claire confirms, and her blue eyes hold Julia's a second that must end. Julia walks to the door, hand on the knob. The light cuts her in half, outside calls, inside keeps her. She turns the handle, the spring creaks, and before the door opens fully, Claire's voice reaches her back, unhurried, unshaken, but with the density of something beginning to contour the impossible. "Julia, if it rains, I'll lend you another coat. You know which one." The market wakes before the sun. Julia arrives at 6:20 with her coat buttoned to the neck and hands tucked in pockets to contain a tremor not just from cold. Mist veils the stalls as if the town hides secrets in waxed fabric. The damp ground reflects yellowed lamps and hurried boots. Claire is already there, leaning on crates, talking to a gesturing supplier. She wears a linen blouse, a discreet V-neck, but enough to draw Julia's gaze mercilessly. Over it, a light open jacket, as if her body trusts the weather. Her blonde hair is imperfectly pinned, strands escape, and this flaw composes. Seeing Julia, Claire makes a small chin gesture, intimate, like calling her into a circle. "You came," she says, unsurprised, her blue eyes sweeping Julia's face like checking a new arrival. "I woke before the lighthouse tired," Julia replies, trying to own her humor, but her voice comes softer. They dive between stalls. The market smells of cut stems, freshly opened stalks, newly picked flowers, wet paper, and a murmur of voices crossing in prices, stories, saints of the day. Claire introduces names sounding like relatives. So-and-so knows chrysanthemums, such-and-such stores lilies under cloth. The guy at the fourth stall knows when to cut hydrangeas, to not kill the blue. Julia notes mentally, but what doesn't fit on paper is the measured distance of Claire's body, a step ahead when the path narrows, a step beside when deciding, a step behind when the other needs to see. Sometimes Claire's hand touches Julia's forearm to guide her. It's a quick, efficient, almost innocent touch, and thus more dangerous. They stop at a stall of old roses, small, full of heart and promise. Claire picks color by color with unexplained criteria, and Julia steps close enough to feel her pulse beating in the space between them, as if her skin has gained new hearing. A woman passes and says, "Pretty girls working early," and they laugh reflexively, but the phrase lingers, a caption the market decides to write about them. Claire takes a thorny branch without gloves, and a thorn grazes her, nothing serious, just enough for a red dot on her thumb. Julia extends her hand before thinking. "Let me," she says, firm and low. She holds Claire's hand, turns the palm, blows lightly as if dispelling heat, then wipes the cut with her own thumb. Claire watches, surprised but accepting the kindness without drama. The blood is minimal but too red in that green world. Julia takes a handkerchief from her pocket, a worn square smelling of soap, and ties it precisely, like a sailor's knot. When she lets go, her fingers linger a moment longer over Claire's. The provocation isn't the gesture's nudity, it's the time. "You'll spoil me," Claire says, pulling her hand back, her smile a discreet blade. Some plants need that, Julia counters, and plants means more than it should. They buy eucalyptus boxes, lavender bundles, olive branches, for those who like talking shade. Claire is looser here than in the shop. She laughs sharply, negotiates with humor that cuts and heals in one sentence, leans her hip on the wooden counter as if it's her body's extension. Julia follows, carries a large box alone to prove her strength, and when it threatens to slip, Claire arrives behind, arms encircling, hands finding edges alongside Julia's. The weight stabilizes, but their bodies don't. Claire's face nears Julia's neck enough for a strand of hair to escape and touch. Julia wonders if an entire world hides in the tiny path between ear and collarbone. The air warms momentarily, the market clamors on, oblivious to the season change only to perceive. You're the type who learns fast? Claire asks, already knowing the answer. I'm the type who doesn't like losing what I just gained, Julia replies, and the words carry the weight they want. They carry the boxes to Claire's old van, a vehicle smelling of dry earth and duct tape, with paint scratches mapping other mornings. Claire enters first and extends a hand to pull Julia into the passenger seat. Julia hesitates but accepts, and the pulling force is calculated, unshowy, with exact math to shrink distance without violence. The drive to the shop is short, the street wakes slowly, and they travel in silence that doesn't apologize, silence testing limits and awakening the desire to cross them. When they park, the sky cracks blue. Julia steps out with a box in her lap. Claire locks the car, turns the key with a motion Julia could recognize in the dark. The shop, still closed to the public, holds a rehearsal's half-light. Claire turns on only the back lights, the rest is left to the skylight. They work side by side, unpacking market goods, refilling water buckets, trimming stems. Julia no longer asks permission to occupy small tasks, Claire no longer asks if she wants to. Sometimes Claire's hand passes over Julia's shoulder to reach scissors, and the shoulder receives the weight of fingers resting a second longer than needed. Other times, Julia leans behind her to grab tape, and her breath passes Claire's nape, who doesn't move away. Cut diagonally, Claire says beside her, her voice near Julia's ear. Water enters better when you open an unseen door. It's like that with many things, Julia replies, and the metaphor doesn't ask permission to settle. The first customer arrives early. Claire attends, and Julia watches her like studying rare tides, how she tilts her head when listening, measures space with her eyes before moving anything, the delicacy of her wrist when turning a stem to find the right angle. Today, Claire's blouse casts subtle shadows with arm movements, and Julia must discipline her gaze like disciplining plants straying from the line. When the customer leaves, Claire turns and finds Julia overfilling a bucket. You're overfeeding that arrangement, she comments humorously. Not all excess is virtuous. Sometimes it is, Julia says, and they pause within the sentence, as if it opens a window to a place they know and pretend not to. Noon approaches with unexpected heat, and the skylight acts as a magnifying glass. Claire pins her hair again, now in an improvised bun with a pencil from the counter, and the decision to expose her neck is an act without audience but with consequence. Julia pretends to need something from above to justify stretching her arms and inadvertently exposing skin her coat doesn't cover. Claire notices, and her generosity doesn't turn to mockery, she just steps close enough to share a patch of shade. Lunch here or back at the inn? Claire asks, drying her hands on her apron. If I go, I lose you, Julia says simply. And if you stay, you find me, Claire replies in the same tone. They eat something easy on the bench behind the shop, bread, cheese, a fruit Claire peels with her usual knife, sharing slices passing hand to hand without plates, etiquette, or error. The radio accidentally plays a tango, someone in the neighborhood left a vinyl spinning, and the signal arrives distorted. Claire teases a half-step, a minimal dance gesture, just to laugh at herself, but Julia accepts the invitation gravely. They don't dance, they test distance. The tip of Claire's fingers meets the base of Julia's, and there they stay, like a nail without a hammer. Julia feels her heart marking rhythm in her hand, and the rest of her body joins, though still. The tango fades, and the hand hasn't left. Afternoon reaches its warmest angle when a dark cloud rises from the sea and invades the light. The first thunder warns. Claire runs to gather plants from the backyard. Julia follows, holding the tarp-covering shelves. Wind enters behind the house, hits both bodies like a push without malice. Heavy rain starts at once, without preamble. In the yard, water in seconds streams over stones as if it always lived there. Claire ties a rope with a firm knot, and Julia holds the opposite end, arms stretched, hands slipping on wet twine. When the knot loosens slightly, they step closer to shorten the rope's distance, and the meeting is inevitable. Julia's chest brushes Claire's shoulder, Claire's chin grazes Julia's hair, their breath sinks from effort. The tension time turns to muscle. Inside, Claire orders finally, her voice holding authority. Julia doesn't question. They enter drenched, laughing at their state, and the laughter smooths edges like a warm cloth. The light flickers, once, twice, and dies. The shop plunges into artificial twilight. Claire lights 2 candles kept for poetic emergencies, and the space redraws in wide shadows, trembling edges, glints on wet surfaces. Julia removes her coat, hangs it on a chair, the shirt beneath clings to her body, betraying her back's curve when she leans for a dry cloth. Claire notices, goes to the storage, and returns with a dark shirt. Will save you from a cold, offering it without ceremony. Julia hesitates a second but accepts, turns away, loosens the collar, changes quickly, her back turned, knowing her nape says more than she'd like. The entire shop's air pays attention. Better, Claire comments upon her return. Now you look like you belong here. And you look like the reason I'm not leaving, Julia blurts unannounced, the words inventing courage for themselves. The sentence lingers, and the surrounding silence breathes with them. Outside, rain beats rhythms on the awning. Inside, a candle cast's face flickers only fire permits. Claire takes 2 steps, no more, and stops at a distance that both protects and ignites. Her hand rises slowly, as if asking the air permission to exist, and touches the strand falling on Julia's forehead, a remnant of their yard rush. The touch is almost nothing, but it's vertical, it descends from forehead to temple, stopping before tracing the ear. Julia doesn't move. Her whole body stays still for this gesture to happen. Breathing deepens, invisible and audible. I don't want to ruin this, Claire says softly, as if confessing to her own chest. Then don't stop, Julia replies, and the command fits the voice of someone finally daring. A knock at the front door interrupts like scissors cutting the wrong stem. They exchange glances, half laughing, half annoyed at the world's intrusion. Claire withdraws her hand, returns it to her sides as if remembering she has a body. The candle trembles with movement. The knock repeats, and a figure appears at the window, someone with a shaking umbrella, a customer lost in the storm or a neighbor begging for a bouquet mid-deluge. Claire steps forward, and Julia stays a step behind, still feeling on her skin the incomplete path of the finger that touched her, an open route that didn't reach its destination. Claire turns the key, the door creaks, the rain invades a bit more, and the story, for a moment, breathes on the threshold. Closed for the rain, Claire tells the world, and her voice, by a thread, almost says something else. The storm turns the street into a vibrating ribbon of water and light. Claire holds the door with her shoulder, kindly but firmly refuses the drenched customer, lends a plastic bag to save some package he carries, and when she finally locks up, the world returns inside the shop in a warm exhale of candle and wet earth. Julia, still in the borrowed dark shirt, feels her skin react to the fabric as if it had memory of the recent touch. The silence that settles is dense, a pause that isn't rest but premeditation. The candle stretches shadows on the ceiling, leaves glisten with droplets capturing fire, the dead radio static seems to breathe in sync with them. Sorry, Claire says, leaning her forehead lightly on the doorframe, a brief gesture of fatigue exposing a vulnerability Julia hasn't seen before. It was a neighbor. Gutter problems. The world always finds a crack to enter, Julia replies, sweetness in her irony. Claire turns, lets her head tilt a millimeter, and this small misalignment sparks. She walks to the counter, takes a cloth, and wipes surfaces as if needing to give her hands a task to prevent betrayal. Julia approaches without sparing distance, stops across the counter, and they face each other, candles creating an intimate corridor between objects. The lavender scent living in the cloth rises into their breath, installing a clean memory. Julia looks away to the tools, the scissors with water drops, the satin ribbons. Touches one, the fabric slips through her fingers with dangerous softness. Claire. She begins, and halts the sentence, as if respecting an unknown ritual. I know, Claire says, and it's everything, for a moment. Then adds, rain makes everything sharper. Julia searches where to put her hands and finds emptiness, so she fills the air with voice. She recounts, in short, honest sentences, how the city she came from dried inside her, how the sound of her own name in university halls lost meaning, how the language of plants saved her from a certain pact with haste. It's not a humbled confession, it's a map. Claire listens without pity and without prescription, spine straight, blue eyes steady. When Julia finishes, the response isn't speech, it's the exact gesture of pushing the candle a few inches forward, as if lighting the other more justly. I ran from a bar where the music was always too loud, Claire says, and the story's outline appears without becoming a catalogue of pain. My father said plants were a luxury. I took time to understand luxury was living where the day's end didn't shout. Here, I find peace. Or almost. Almost. Julia prods, resting her fingertips on the counter's edge. Sometimes I fear what happens when someone sees too much, Claire admits, and the sentence settles between them with a weight no wind can topple. The rain sound weakens and changes quality, now it hits puddles, not tiles. The lighthouse's light cuts the window like an intermittent blade. Julia circles the counter, slowly, her body saying, I won't startle, her breath announcing, I won't flee. Claire doesn't retreat, keeps her feet where they are, but her left hand, the one with the bandage, reaches her apron pocket and finds a folded envelope. She removes it and places it on the table. It's shallow, faded, with a corner restaurant's logo. Julia looks reflexively, not curiously. From the bar, Claire explains. Sometimes, someone appears. Someone from the other life. And I remember why I left. And also why I fear staying. Someone recognized you here? Julia asks, her voice grave with anticipated danger. Yesterday. A woman. Said, the stage was better for me. I laughed. But not much. Julia holds the envelope and returns it gently to Claire's hand. Their fingers touch a second longer than logistics would allow. A shadow of jealousy passes Julia's face, not of people, but of the past biting courage's heel. The stage is here, Julia says, measuring the words. It just changed lights. Their breathing nears without overt movement. Julia knows she wants to press her forehead to Claire's, but also knows it's not yet time. Her body understands the geography of delay like a new muscle. She raises her hand to shoulder height, hesitates long enough for Claire to notice a question in her skin, then touches the apron's fabric, a neutral place, as if testing the cloth's weight. Claire accepts, shifts her weight a centimeter forward, agreeing without words. The tension rises without scandal, and the nearby candle registers a slight tremor. The landline rings in the shop's back with its antique bell, as if from another time. Claire steps back, answers, says, tomorrow at 10 works, arranges delivery, and hangs up. Julia, seizing the pause, walks to the backyard. The rain has lessened to a thread, the air smells of washed stone, and the orchids seem to hold droplets like glass jewels. She scratches her temple with her knuckle, repositions a leaf carefully, whispers something the plant understands. It's not flight, it's part of the choreography. Claire appears in the doorway with 2 steaming teacups. Not coffee, but it warms, she says, handing one. And the power should return soon. Sometimes it's better when it doesn't return too fast, Julia counters, blowing the steam. They sit on the old iron chair and wooden step, close enough for their legs to almost touch, but not yet. The cup's heat migrates to their hands, and with each sip, their chests disarm a grain of armor. Claire tells of learning to prune without mercy, how she realized some things only grow when excess is lost, how her father vanished on a road and returned months later with a dead cigarette on his lips, as if nothing happened. Julia listens and thinks of prune and excess as heart tools, looks at Claire's bandaged finger as a reminder that even care wounds slightly. A breeze stirs Julia's hair and brushes Claire's face. Claire closes her eyes for a second, as if receiving a gift of scent and temperature. I want to show you something, Claire says, standing and beckoning. It's better with the light left after rain. They cross the narrow hall and descend 3 steps Julia didn't know. Behind a slatted door, a small greenhouse waits, warm, holding a sweaty green world inside. Humidity rises like a thin fabric hug, and the air smells of new moss. Claire lights a modest bulb that doesn't fight the gloom, just organizes it. On a side shelf, small pots hold seedlings that seem almost drawn, so tiny they demand attention's microscope. Claire takes a sprayer, the quietest possible, and moistens the leaves like petting. When I can't decide, I come here, she confesses in a sound half voice, half vapor. They remind me growing is ugly at first. Julia smiles with her eyes, touches the glass separating trays, feels the material's thin cold and humid warmth meeting on her skin. Claire stands beside her, so close Julia's new shirt sleeve brushes the back of her hand, and a discreet electric line exists there, as if denying it would be stupid. The bulb creates light points on droplets resting on leaves. The world reduces to this, synced breaths, microdecisions of proximity, a script of gestures having both author and improvisation. Julia, Claire says, and it's the first time she pronounces the name in a way no longer fitting neutral conversation. Yes. I'm not good at speeches. But I don't want you to think I didn't see. She pauses, hunts the sentence like chasing a shadow. I saw. Me too, Julia replies, and the agreement is a step. Claire raises her hand slowly and touches Julia's shoulder over the fabric, fingertips only, to measure the silence that would follow. Julia closes her eyes briefly, not from modesty, but so her whole body could pay attention to that contact. Claire's hand doesn't slide, stays there, fixed, declared presence, installed warmth. Julia turns her face slightly, brings her chin nearer Claire's shoulder in a minimal gesture of return, almost a nest. They stay like this for long seconds, or short, time loses precision, and the greenhouse keeps, complicit, the breathing slowing. A wooden creak snaps them from suspension. It's no threat, just the house adjusting to drying rain, but under their skin lingers the suspicion the world can always intervene. Claire lowers her hand and steps back, not from regret, but so desire won't eat the story's margins. She turns off the bulb, and semi-darkness returns things to less evident contours. In the tight passage, their shoulders brush, an accident both allow with deliciously calculated delay. The return passes the ribboned shelf, the now tepid teacup, the lavender cloth losing scent. And the oval mirror near the counter, catching them briefly and returning them with ghostly edges, 2 ordinary-looking women in an ordinary shop, except they've just recognized each other. The power returns with a snap, lights blinking as if yawning. Normality enters with a truck's delicacy. Claire laughs at the scare, and Julia laughs at Claire's laugh. The wall clock reads 5:20, half an hour remains until closing. Customers may return, the street has left river condition. Claire opens the door to air out, wind enters carrying ocean's residual cold, leaves tremble, distant bar music hints. A woman stops on the sidewalk, pinned hair, leather jacket, eyes measuring like someone accustomed to stages. Claire hardens imperceptibly, the world wouldn't notice, but Julia does. Need something? Claire asks from the door, cordial and straight. Came to see if you still make arrangements that floor me, the woman replies without prelude, humor demanding someone accept the joke. Today I make arrangements that floor no one, Claire says, a smile marking the limit. They only hold. Julia watches them with calm that costs her. She doesn't interfere, mark territory, turn the scene into tribunal. Claire enters, assembles a simple, direct arrangement, the woman pays, leaves a card face down, and departing, only glances the shop as if checking a set. When the door closes, the air loses a metal drop. From the bar, Claire says, setting the card unflipped. Doesn't matter. I know, Julia replies. And it doesn't matter. They work the last minutes with routine's discipline. Store scissors, empty buckets, flip the sign to closed. The skylight returns a cold blue, and the town begins lighting windows. Claire turns off lights one by one until only two remain, mild, enough to see each other without strain. Julia puts on her dry coat, Claire takes the car key. They face each other in the doorway, where the street demands a step and the shop another. I'll drop you at the inn, Claire offers, tone so natural it almost hides the larger invitation within. I accept, Julia says, and the reply carries a quarter of audacity. The van smells of what touched the day, eucalyptus, wet rope, dry cloth. They enter, Claire turns the key, the engine complains of cold, then accepts. The street slides slowly under tired headlights. No one speaks the first 2 blocks, and the silence isn't an abyss, it's a corridor. At the light, red spills over their hands, and hands stay there, still, close, not touching, as if agreeing to delay for exactly 3 heartbeats. The light changes, the van moves. The port's beacon sweeps the hill, and the inn appears with its wooden porch and unchanging yellow lamp. Claire parks, doesn't turn off the engine. Turns her face to Julia, and Julia's face is turned to her. There's no rush. No excuse. There's exact awareness of their body's place in the seat, the belt crossing chests, the tiny space between face and face. Claire unbuckles, and the clasp snap sounds like a comma changing a 2 long sentence's meaning. Tomorrow, Claire says, a word promising everything and imposing nothing. Tomorrow, Julia repeats, and the word leaves whole. Claire leans 2 centimeters and stops, Julia leans 1, the 2 centimeters become almost touch, almost, and aren't. The engine idles, as if marking the cadence of what nears. Claire's hand finds Julia's chin and holds it with a tenderness asking nothing, only offering presence. Eyes accept each other with a calm that burns. A couple speaks loudly on the sidewalk, a dog runs past, the world reminds its existence and retreats. Claire withdraws her hand, rests it on her knee. Julia breathes deep, opens the door, steps out, leans into the cab with her head framed by porch light. Good night, Claire. Good night, Julia. The door closes gently, the van leaves slowly. Julia stays on the step, hand on the railing, watching the street swallow the car. She climbs, crosses the wooden hall, enters the room smelling of clean and salt, turns on the lamp. Presses her forehead to the window, the city reflecting on her like a second skin. Her phone vibrates, a message from an unknown number, an online lecture invitation, she deletes it. Removes her coat, lies on her side, curtains open, so the port's beacon can visit. She knows night is an animal that learns fast. Breathing finds time, body, a place, and the word, tomorrow, rests on the nightstand like a flower without a vase still standing. In the dark between light blades, Julia thinks of Claire's hands, the weight a palm knows to give a bouquet, the restraint that isn't cowardice, the appetite not confessed loudly, and the necessary cuts for something to arrive whole. Outside, rain surrenders to dripping. Julia closes her eyes and lets one thought remain, clear and enough, certain promises needn't be spoken to know they exist. And certain distances, when well tended, bloom exactly when they should be crossed. Tomorrow. The next morning starts with the same sea murmur, but Julia wakes with another temperature inside. There's no more room for flight. Every Claire gesture in her memory has become an invitation, every word a promise. The inn smells of coffee and wet wood, but Julia leaves without tasting. Her body asks for something else, not common food. Outside, the light holds that damp tone after much rain, and each step to the flower shop seems to drag the weight of contained days. When she opens the door, Claire is already waiting, as if predicting the hour. She wears a loose white shirt, sleeves rolled to elbows, the neckline discreet but dangerous with slightest movement. Her blonde hair, still damp, admits she left the shower recently. A strand trails her temple and sticks to her jaw's curve. Julia's stomach tightens, as if plunging into icy water, but her whole skin ignites with heat. "Thought you'd leave me alone with all these flowers," Claire says, feigning lightness, but her eyes betray she expected the opposite. "I'd never leave you alone here," Julia replies, her voice softer than intended. The silence between them is no longer comfortable as before, it pulses, an electric field threatening rupture. Julia nears the counter, feigns interest in a lavender vase, but her body wants otherwise. Claire comes behind for scissors, passing, her shoulder brushes Julia's bare arm, and Julia holds her breath. Accidental touch. Provocation. Julia doesn't know, but her body does. They work side by side for dragging minutes until Julia drops the ribbon and steps closer, purposely. Claire's scent mixes fresh soap with flowers' green sweetness. Julia risks, adjusts Claire's white shirt collar as excuse to touch. Her fingertips brush collarbone, and Claire shivers slightly but doesn't retreat. Blue eyes meet green, and there's no flight. "Julia," Claire says, but the sentence dies in air. Julia waits for no continuation. Raises her hand and slides her knuckles along Claire's jaw, slowly, almost asking the other's body for an answer already given. Claire closes her eyes, leans in, and the first kiss happens not as explosion but long promise. Lips touch shyly, retreat, return firmer. Scissors fall from the counter with a metallic sound no one cares to retrieve. The kiss deepens, and Julia feels Claire's mouth warm, wet, alive, as if waiting exactly for this moment. Hands seek path, Julia holds Claire's waist, feels the shirt's thin fabric, the skin's heat beneath. Claire slides fingers up Julia's nape, pulling brown hair back, cradling her face as if fearing the world might snatch her away. Desire installs without permission. Julia presses Claire against the counter, but slowly, with respect, letting the other's body choose surrender. Claire responds intensely, opens her mouth, bites lightly, and the low moan escaping her throat is an invisible cut on Julia, who can no longer pretend containment. They part briefly to breathe, but eyes remain locked. Claire cups Julia's face with her whole palm, as if confirming she's real. "I don't want to be afraid," she confesses, voice trembling, almost a whisper. "Then don't be," Julia replies, and kisses her again hungrily, now without pauses. The climax extends in gestures, not haste. Claire's shirt slips off her shoulders, revealing golden skin glowing under skylight. Julia kisses the path skin indicates, devours each detail with reverence. Claire, in turn, explores Julia's body with her hands, descending slowly along waist's curve, hips line, discovering like a promised landscape. Their bodies entwine over the counter's wood, among forgotten flowers and tools, and lavender and wet earth scents mix with breath's heat. Nothing in them is rushed, but all is urgent. Mouths meet, lose, seek again. Julia drags lips along Claire's throat while her nails mark the other's fair skin. World sound vanishes, only low moans, ragged breath, wood's discreet creak remain. Time dissolves. When bodies finally rest, tired and sated, silence returns, but now it's different, no longer the tense silence of before, but the full silence of those who found. Julia lays her head on Claire's shoulder, feels her heart still racing, chest rising and falling as if she'd run miles. Claire runs fingers through Julia's hair, combing slowly, a caress saying more than any phrase. "Thank you for not leaving," Claire whispers, and her eyes shine with contained emotion. Julia lifts her face, meets deep blue, and replies only, "I never will." They kiss again, now calmly, without prior haste, as if sealing a promise. The secret garden Julia sought has bloomed inside the flower shop, among orchids and lavender, but above all, inside two women who dared cross fear to find love. If this story touched your heart, subscribe to the channel, like this video, and share it with someone special. And tell us in the comments, which moment moved you the most in this story.